I walked into my bedroom and froze. My husband was tangled in sheets with my daughter-in-law. The betrayal hurt, but what destroyed me was her smile when she saw me. I simply closed the door. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Now, let me tell you how I got to that moment and what happened next. Because sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing that ever could. My name is Dorothy Williams, but everyone calls me Dot. I'm 64 years old, married to Frank for 42 years, and until last Thursday afternoon, I thought I knew exactly who I was. A devoted wife, a supportive mother-in-law, and apparently the biggest fool in Ohio. Let me back up to Tuesday, 2 days before my world imploded. I was in my kitchen making Frank's favorite pot roast when our son Mark called. "Mom, Sam and I might be late to dinner Sunday. She's got that client meeting running over." Samantha, my daughter-in-law, worked in real estate. Beautiful, ambitious, and always perfectly put together. The kind of woman who made me feel frumpy in my comfortable cardigans and sensible shoes. "Of course, sweetheart. I'll keep everything warm." "You're the best, Mom. Sam always says how lucky we are to have you." Right. Lucky them indeed. Wednesday evening, Frank seemed restless, kept checking his phone, claimed he had a conference call with his old business partner. Frank retired from his accounting firm 3 years ago, but occasionally helped with complex cases. "Might run late tomorrow," he said, not meeting my eyes. "This case is more complicated than I thought. 42 years of marriage teaches you to read the signs." But I pushed down the suspicion, telling myself I was being paranoid. Frank had never given me reason to doubt him. Thursday afternoon, I came home early from my volunteer shift at the hospital. My back was acting up, and I just wanted a hot bath and some quiet time. I parked in the garage, entered through the kitchen, and headed upstairs to change clothes. That's when I heard it. Soft laughter coming from our bedroom. Female laughter that wasn't mine. My heart hammered as I approached our door. It was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see them clearly. Frank and Samantha. But the moment that broke me wasn't seeing them together. It was when she opened her eyes, looked directly at me standing in the doorway, and smiled. Not embarrassed, not guilty. I stood there for maybe 5 seconds, watching my entire life crumble. Then I quietly stepped back and closed the door with a soft click. The old Dot would have screamed, cried, thrown things. But standing in that hallway, listening to them continue their affair just feet away from me, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. I walked downstairs, sat at my kitchen table, and began planning exactly how to destroy them both. The rest of Thursday passed in a strange haze. I made dinner, acted normal, even complimented Frank on his tie when he came down. Meanwhile, my brain was working like a computer, cataloging every detail, every lie, every opportunity. "How was your conference call?" I asked over meatloaf. "Productive," he said, not looking up from his plate. "Probably have a few more sessions this week." More sessions. Right. I wondered if Sam told Mark she'd be having more client meetings too. That night, Frank showered longer than usual. I pretended to read in bed, watching him through my peripheral vision. He was almost humming, the satisfied sound of a man who thought he was getting away with something clever. When he finally crawled into bed, I wanted to vomit thinking about where those hands had been just hours earlier. Instead, I rolled over and said goodnight like I had thousands of times before. Except this time, I was already 3 steps ahead of him. Friday morning, I called my friend Patricia. Pat had been through a nasty divorce 5 years ago and learned some hard lessons about protecting yourself financially. "Dot, you sound strange. Everything all right? I need some advice. Hypothetically speaking, if someone discovered their spouse was cheating, what would be the smartest first move?" There was a long pause. Hypothetically? Completely hypothetical. Hypothetically, that someone should immediately secure documentation of all joint accounts, assets and debts before confronting anyone. Evidence first, emotions later. And Dot? Hypothetically speaking, that someone should also take pictures. Pictures. I hadn't thought of that. That afternoon, while Frank was at his meeting with Sam, I went through our home office with systematic precision. 42 years of marriage meant Frank had grown complacent about hiding things. I found our insurance policies, retirement account statements, the deed to our house, even his old business partnership agreement. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Frank had been moving money, small amounts over the past 6 months, transferred to an account I'd never seen before. Nothing huge, nothing I'd notice in my weekly budget check, but it added up to almost $30,000. My devoted husband wasn't just cheating on me, he was stealing from me too. I photographed everything with my phone, uploaded the images to a new cloud account, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. By the time Frank came home looking satisfied and guilty, I was back in my kitchen peeling potatoes for dinner. "Good day?" I asked sweetly. "Exhausting," he replied. "This case is really taking it out of me." I bet it was. Saturday brought our usual routine. Frank played golf, I did the grocery shopping and caught up on laundry. Normal suburban life, except I spent my morning at the bank opening a new account and my afternoon visiting my old friend Margaret Chen, who happened to be one of the best divorce attorneys in the city. "Dot Williams," Margaret said, genuine surprise in her voice. "I haven't seen you in years. How's Frank?" "That's actually why I'm here." I laid out everything, the affair, the money transfers, the systematic deception. Margaret listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "How long do you think this has been going on?" "Based on the bank records? At least 6 months. But knowing Sam, probably longer." "And you're certain you want to proceed?" I thought about Sam's smile, about Frank's lies, about 42 years of devotion being thrown away for some midlife excitement. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Margaret smiled grimly. "Then let's make sure they never see it coming." Sunday dinner arrived like a performance where everyone knew their lines except the audience. Frank carved the roast with his usual precision, while Sam complimented my green bean casserole. Mark talked about work, completely oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around my dining room table. "Mom, this is delicious," Sam said, her voice warm with false affection. "You really outdid yourself." I watched her fork another bite, wondering how someone could sit at my table, eat my food, and smile at me after what she'd done. The audacity was almost impressive. "Thank you, dear. I put extra love into it this time." Frank choked slightly on his wine. Sam's eyes flicked to his, just for a second, but I caught it. They had signals now, little glances and shared secrets. How romantic. After dinner, while the men watched football, Sam helped me clear dishes. We worked in my kitchen, side by side, like we had dozens of times before. Except now I knew exactly what those perfectly manicured hands had been doing. "Dot," she said quietly, "I wanted to thank you again for recommending me to the Hendersons. That commission really helped us out." "Of course, sweetheart. Family helps family." She smiled that same triumphant smile I'd seen Thursday afternoon. "You're the best mother-in-law anyone could ask for." The urge to throw my good china at her lying face was almost overwhelming. Instead, I smiled back and handed her another plate to dry. I try my best. Monday morning brought phase 2 of my plan. While Frank was at the gym, or so he claimed, I called Mark at work. "Mom, everything okay? You never call this early." "I'm fine, honey. I just wanted to ask about Sam's work schedule. I'm planning a surprise birthday party for Mrs. Henderson, and I thought Sam might want to help coordinate since she knows her preferences." "Oh, that's sweet, Mom. But Sam's schedule is crazy right now. She's got these big client meetings almost every afternoon this week. Yesterday she didn't get home until after 10. My stomach twisted. Yesterday was Sunday. We'd had dinner together until 7. Then Sam had left with Mark around 8:30. What client meeting happens on a Sunday night until 10? "Well, I'm sure she's working very hard." "Yeah, this new client is really demanding. High maintenance. You know how it is." High maintenance indeed. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my coffee mug. A gift from Mark, last Mother's Day. "World's best mom," in cheerful blue letters. The irony was suffocating. My phone rang, Frank's number. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, proud of how normal my voice sounded. "Hey, Dot, I'm going to be late again tonight. This case is really heating up." "Of course it is. Will you be home for dinner?" "Better not count on it. Don't wait up." The call ended, and I found myself laughing. Actually laughing out loud in my empty kitchen. The sheer brazenness of it all was almost admirable. They thought they were so clever, so sophisticated with their little affair. They had no idea what was coming. I spent the rest of Monday implementing Margaret's advice. Every joint account, every shared asset, every piece of our financial life got documented and secured. I opened my own checking account, rerouted my Social Security direct deposit, and changed the passwords on everything I could access. By Tuesday morning, I was ready for Phase 3. I called Sam's real estate office. Williams Realty, this is Jessica. Hi Jessica, this is Dorothy Williams, Sam's mother-in-law. I was hoping to surprise her with lunch today. Could you tell me when might be a good time? I know she's been so busy with that demanding new client. There was a pause. Mrs. Williams, Sam actually took the week off. She said she was going to visit her sister in Michigan. Didn't she tell you? My blood went cold. Oh, of course. I must have gotten my weeks confused. Thank you, dear. I hung up and stared at the phone. Sam hadn't taken time off to visit her sister. She'd taken time off to spend entire days with my husband while I volunteered at the hospital and ran errands around town like the oblivious fool they thought I was. But this lie was going to be their undoing, because now I had exactly what Margaret said I'd need. Concrete evidence of deception that even Mark couldn't ignore. Time to watch their perfect little world implode. Wednesday morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that comes from finally understanding exactly what you're dealing with. Frank was already downstairs, probably planning his day of work with my daughter-in-law. Morning, sweetheart, I called cheerfully as I entered the kitchen. He jumped slightly, spilling coffee on his shirt. Morning, Dot. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. Too excited about today. His face went pale. Excited about what? Oh, I thought I'd surprise Sam with a visit. Maybe take her to lunch while she's off work this week. Frank's coffee mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Off work? I tilted my head innocently. Didn't Mark tell you? Sam took the week off to visit her sister in Michigan. Such a devoted daughter, that Sam. Though I'm surprised she didn't mention it to you during your conference calls. I watched Frank's face cycle through confusion, panic, and something that looked like admiration. He realized I knew, but he couldn't figure out how much. I should get going. Big day ahead. I'm sure it is. Give my love to your business partner. 20 minutes after Frank left, his phone rang on the kitchen counter. He'd forgotten it in his panic. The caller ID read, Sam. I answered on the fourth ring. Frank? Thank God. I've been trying to call you. Something's wrong. Dorothy knows something. She called my office asking about lunch, and Jessica told her I took the week off. She knows, Frank. She knows. This isn't Frank. Dead silence. Then a whispered, oh God. Hello, Samantha. Having a nice week off in Michigan? Dot. I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're very creative. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to come to my house right now. Frank will already be here by the time you arrive. I'm calling him next. We're going to have a little family meeting. Dot, please, this isn't what you think. Samantha, you have exactly 30 minutes to get here. If you're not at my front door by then, I'm calling Mark and explaining why his wife has been lying about her whereabouts while his father has been stealing money from our joint accounts. Another long silence. You know about the money? I know about everything. 30 minutes. I hung up and immediately dialed Frank's work number. Patterson and Associates, this is Linda. Hi, Linda, this is Dorothy Williams. Is Frank available? It's important. Mrs. Williams, I'm sorry, but Frank isn't here. He doesn't come in on Wednesdays anymore. Not since he retired. Is everything all right? Everything's perfect, Linda. Thank you. So Frank had been lying about where he went every Wednesday, too. I wondered what other truths were about to surface. I spent the next 25 minutes setting up my laptop on the dining room table and brewing a fresh pot of coffee. If we were going to destroy 42 years of marriage and 20 years of family relationships, we might as well be civilized about it. Frank arrived first, looking haggard and desperate. Dot, we need to talk. Yes, we do. Sit down. You don't understand. It's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looked like my husband of 42 years was having sex with my son's wife in our marital bed. But please, enlighten me about what I didn't understand. Frank collapsed into his chair just as Sam's car pulled into the driveway. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for a full minute, probably trying to figure out how to spin this disaster. She finally walked through my front door, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the last hour. Sit down, Samantha. Let's discuss your interesting interpretation of family loyalty. But before anyone could say another word, we heard a car door slam outside. Mark's voice carried through the window. "Mom? Dad? Sam's car is here, but she's supposed to be in Michigan. What's going on?" Frank and Sam looked at each other in pure terror, and I smiled for the first time in days. Mark walked through my front door expecting normal Wednesday afternoon life, and instead found his wife and father sitting at my dining room table, looking like they'd been caught robbing a bank. "What's going on?" he asked, his eyes moving between the three of us. "Sam, why aren't you in Michigan? And Dad, I thought you had meetings today." "Sit down, honey," I said gently. "There are some things you need to know." "Mom, you're scaring me. Is someone sick? Is it Grandma?" "No one's sick, Mark, but our family has been living a lie for months, and it's time you knew the truth." I opened my laptop and pulled up the photos I'd taken of our bank statements. "Your father has been moving money from our joint accounts into a private account. $30,000 over the past 6 months. Mark's face went white. "Dad, what is she talking about?" Frank couldn't meet his son's eyes. "Mark, it's complicated. And your wife," I continued calmly, "has been lying about her work schedule. She told you she had client meetings every afternoon this week, but she actually took vacation time. Her office thinks she's visiting her sister in Michigan." "That's impossible," Mark said, but his voice was uncertain. "Sam, tell her she's wrong." Sam opened her mouth, but no words came out. "The reason they've been lying," I said, my voice steady as granite, "is because they've been having an affair. I caught them in our bedroom last Thursday afternoon." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark looked from me to Sam to Frank, waiting for someone to deny it, to explain it away, to make it make sense. No one did. "Sam!" Mark's voice cracked like a teenager's. "Please tell me this isn't true." Sam started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration at being caught. "Mark, I never meant for this to happen. It just did." "You never meant for this to happen?" Mark repeated slowly. "Or you never meant to get caught?" "Both," Frank said quietly, finally speaking up. "We never meant for any of this to happen." I watched my son's face as the reality hit him. His wife and his father had betrayed him in the most devastating way possible. The two people who should have protected him had destroyed him instead. "How long?" Mark asked. Frank and Sam exchanged glances. "About a year," Sam whispered. "A year." Mark sat down heavily. "A year of lying to my face. A year of you pretending to love me while you were sleeping with my father." "Mark, I do love you," Sam started. "Don't." His voice was ice. "Don't you dare tell me you love me after what you've done." I reached over and squeezed my son's hand. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "How did you find out?" "I came home early Thursday and saw them together." "And you've known since Thursday?" He looked at me with something like awe. "You've been planning this whole confrontation for 6 days? Your mother is more strategic than we gave her credit for," Frank said, and there was something almost like pride in his voice. "Don't speak about me like I'm not here," I snapped. "And don't act like you're impressed. You forfeited any right to opinions about me when you decided to steal from me and sleep with our daughter-in-law." Mark stood up abruptly. "I can't be here right now. I can't look at either of you." "Mark, wait," Sam pleaded. "We can work through this. We can go to counseling." "Counseling?" Mark turned around, his face filled with rage I'd never seen before. "You want to go to counseling after you've been screwing my father for a year?" "Please don't leave," Sam begged. "We have 8 years together. That has to count for something." "What about the 42 years your lover had with my mother? Did that count for anything when you were spreading your legs in her bed?" The crude language was so unlike my gentle son that it shocked everyone into silence. "I want you out of our house," Mark said to Sam. "Tonight. Take your things and go stay with your sister. The real one, in Michigan, if she'll have you." "Mark, please." "And you," he turned to Frank, "stay away from me. I don't want to see you, talk to you, or hear from you until I decide what I'm going to do about this." Mark headed for the door, then stopped and looked back at me. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry they did this to you, and I'm sorry I didn't see it coming." After he left, the three of us sat in my dining room listening to the clock tick. Finally, Sam spoke. "What happens now?" I looked at her beautiful, tear-streaked face and felt absolutely nothing. "Now, you learn what consequences look like." That evening, After Sam packed her bags and Frank slunk off to our guest room like a scolded dog, I sat alone in my kitchen with a cup of tea and my laptop. Margaret had asked me to document everything while it was fresh, and I wanted to be thorough. But as I typed up the details of our confrontation, my phone kept buzzing with messages. First from Sam. Please. We need to talk about this like adults. What happened between Frank and me doesn't have to destroy our entire family. Then from Frank. I know you're angry, but we've been married 42 years. That has to mean something. We can work through this. Finally, from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Williams, this is Amy Henderson from Williams Realty. Sam asked me to call you. She's very upset and wondering if you could reconsider some of the things you said today. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, even caught red-handed, they were trying to manipulate me. Sam had actually asked her co-worker to call and plead her case, as if this was some misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with the right words. I deleted all the messages without responding and called Margaret instead. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as you predicted. They're already trying to minimize it and make me look like the unreasonable one. That's standard. Tomorrow they'll probably try love bombing. Flowers, tearful apologies, promises to change. Don't let them back in your head, I won't. But there's something else. When I told Mark about the money Frank moved, he looked shocked. Not just hurt, actually shocked. I think Frank might have been stealing from Mark too. There was a pause. We should look into that. If Frank has been accessing accounts that belong to Mark, that's a whole different level of theft. The next morning brought exactly what Margaret had warned me about. Frank knocked on the bedroom door. Our bedroom, which I'd reclaimed by moving his clothes to the guest room. I brought you coffee. Leave it by the door. Please, can we talk? Really talk? We talked yesterday. I said everything I needed to say. I love you, I know I screwed up, but I love you. I opened the door and looked at my husband. In the morning light, he looked older than his 66 years. Tired, desperate, and finally understanding that his actions had consequences. Frank, you don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love having someone to cook your meals and wash your clothes and pay half the bills while you play house with younger women. But you don't love me. That's not true. If you loved me, you wouldn't have stolen our money to impress your mistress. If you loved me, you wouldn't have brought her into our bed. And if you loved me, you wouldn't be standing here trying to convince me to pretend it never happened. I started to close the door, but he put his hand out to stop me. What do you want me to do? Beg? I'll beg. I'll do anything to fix this. You can't fix this, Frank. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. That afternoon, Mark called. Mom, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about Dad moving money around. I checked my accounts, and there are some irregularities I don't understand. My heart sank. What kind of irregularities? Remember when Sam and I bought the new car last year? Dad helped us with the paperwork since he knows about financing, but there are charges on my credit card that I don't remember making, and my savings account is missing about $8,000. Oh, honey, I think Dad might have stolen from me too. Used my information to take out credit in my name or something. Mom, what if this is worse than we thought? That evening, I called an emergency meeting. Not with Frank and Sam this time, but with Mark and Margaret. We sat around my dining room table with bank statements, credit reports, and a growing sense of horror. Frank hadn't just stolen $30,000 from our joint accounts. He'd stolen $8,000 from Mark, opened credit cards in my name that I'd never seen, and somehow accessed Mark's investment account to make unauthorized withdrawals. This isn't just an affair, Margaret said grimly. This is systematic financial fraud. Frank could go to prison for this. Mark was staring at the papers spread across my table. Mom, he stole from both of us to fund his affair with my wife. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. It wasn't just about sex or midlife crisis, or even falling out of love. Frank had systematically robbed his own family to finance his relationship with Sam. What do we do now? Mark asked. Margaret looked at both of us. That depends. How far are you willing to take this? I thought about Frank upstairs in the guest room, probably planning his next attempt at manipulation. I thought about Sam, staying at some hotel, texting her co-workers to plead her case. I thought about 42 years of marriage and 20 years of treating Sam like a daughter. Then I thought about that smile she'd given me when she was naked in my bed with my husband. As far as it takes, I said. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I meant it completely. Monday morning brought detectives to my front door. Two serious-looking people in plain clothes who introduced themselves as Detective Martinez and Detective Chen from the Financial Crimes Unit. Mrs. Williams, we understand you filed a complaint regarding identity theft and financial fraud? Frank appeared behind me in his bathrobe, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. What's going on, Dot? Frank Williams? Detective Martinez consulted her notepad. We'd like to speak with you about unauthorized access to several bank accounts. I watched my husband's face go white. I don't understand. Perhaps we could all sit down, Detective Chen suggested diplomatically. 20 minutes later, Frank was in handcuffs. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, illegal access to Mark's accounts, credit cards opened in my name without consent. What I'd thought was simple marital theft turned out to be felony fraud. We'll need you to come down to the station for processing, Detective Martinez told Frank. You have the right to remain silent. As they read him his rights, Frank kept looking at me like he expected me to intervene, to tell them this was all a misunderstanding. The old Dot might have. The old Dot would have protected him even after everything he'd done. But that woman died Thursday afternoon in my bedroom doorway. After they left, I called Mark. Your father's been arrested. Good, he said without hesitation. What about Sam? She's next. Margaret found evidence that she knew about the stolen money. Text messages between them discussing how to use my credit cards. She was in on it the whole time? It looks that way. Honey, I'm sorry. That afternoon, Sam showed up at my door unannounced. She looked terrible. Unwashed hair, no makeup, wearing the same clothes she'd left in days ago. Dot, we need to talk. No, we don't. Please, 5 minutes. I know you're angry, but there are things you don't understand. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on my couch like she belonged there, like nothing had changed. Frank's been arrested, I said without preamble. Her face crumpled. I know, I heard from his lawyer. Dot, this is insane. You're destroying our entire family over a mistake. A mistake? I sat across from her. Samantha, you helped him steal from me and my son for over a year. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. We never meant to hurt anyone. We were going to pay it all back. With what money? You don't have $60,000 lying around. She looked genuinely confused. 60,000? What are you talking about? The total amount stolen. Didn't Frank tell you? Or were you too busy playing house to discuss the details of your joint felonies? Sam's confusion seemed real, which worried me more than if she'd been lying. Dot, I only knew about the money Frank gave me for our hotel rooms and dinners. Maybe 5,000 total. I didn't know about the rest. Either she was an excellent actress, or Frank had been lying to both of us about the scope of his theft. What exactly did Frank tell you about the money? He said he had a separate account for personal expenses, that you both agreed he could use it for discretionary spending. I felt cold dread settling in my stomach. Sam, Frank emptied our emergency fund, stole from Mark's investment account, and opened credit cards in my name. There was no separate account. The color drained from her face. That's impossible. Frank wouldn't. He said you knew about our relationship, that you had an understanding. He told you what? That your marriage was basically over, that you'd grown apart but stayed together for appearances. He said you wouldn't mind if he found happiness elsewhere as long as he was discreet. I stared at her, finally understanding the full scope of Frank's manipulation. He hadn't just stolen our money and betrayed our marriage. He'd convinced a naive young woman that I was complicit in my own destruction. Samantha, I had no idea about any of this until I caught you in my bed. She started crying then, real tears this time. Oh God, what have I done? But before I could answer, we heard a car in the driveway. Through the window I saw Mark pulling up, his face thunderous. This was about to get much worse. Mark burst through my front door like an avenging angel. What is she doing here? Mark, please. Sam stood up, her hands outstretched. I need to explain. Explain what? How you helped my father steal from my mother? How you lied to my face for a year while you destroyed my family? I didn't know, Sam said desperately. I swear I didn't know about the stolen money. You knew enough, Mark shot back. You knew you were sleeping with my father. You knew you were lying about your work schedule. Don't stand there and pretend you're innocent. I watched my son's rage, recognizing something dangerous in his voice. Mark, sit down. Let's talk about this calmly. Calmly? He turned to me, his eyes blazing. Mom, there's something else you need to know. I spent the weekend going through our finances, Sam's and mine. She's been lying about more than just the affair. Sam went very still. What are you talking about? The house we're buying. The one we're supposed to close on next month? Sam told me her parents were giving us $50,000 for the down payment. But when I called them yesterday to coordinate the wire transfer, they had no idea what I was talking about. My stomach dropped. Where did you think the money was coming from? Sam? I thought Frank was going to help us. With stolen money, Mark said flatly. You were planning to use money stolen from my mother to buy a house with me. That's not how it was supposed to work, Sam protested, but her voice lacked conviction. How was it supposed to work? I asked. Sam collapsed back onto the couch. Frank said he had investment money from his old business that he'd been saving. He said after you guys divorced, he'd help Mark and me get established. Divorced, I repeated. Frank and I aren't getting divorced. But he said, Frank's been telling you a lot of things, Mark interrupted. Like how he was going to leave Mom for you once I was settled. Like how you two could start fresh somewhere new. Sam's face went white. How do you know about that? Because I've been reading your text messages, Sam. Our phone plan gives me access to all the accounts. I've seen everything. The betrayal just kept getting deeper. Frank hadn't just been having an affair and stealing money. He'd been planning an entire future with Sam, using stolen funds to finance their new life together. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. Frank convinced you I knew about the affair, stole money to fund your relationship, promised to leave me for you, and was planning to use more stolen money to help you and Mark buy a house, all while letting you believe this was somehow acceptable. Sam nodded miserably. And you, I turned to Mark, have been reading your wife's private messages? After I found out she was cheating with my father? Yeah, I started paying attention. I looked between my son and daughter-in-law, seeing clearly how Frank's lies had poisoned everything. What else don't I know? Mark pulled out his phone. There's more, Mom. A lot more. But before he could continue, my landline rang. The caller ID showed Frank's lawyer's office. Mrs. Williams? This is Robert Patterson, Frank's attorney. I'm calling because my client would like to speak with you about a possible resolution to this situation. What kind of resolution? Frank is prepared to plead guilty to the financial charges in exchange for your agreement not to pursue civil remedies. He's also willing to sign divorce papers immediately and surrender all claims to marital assets. I looked at Sam and Mark, both watching me intently. Frank was offering me everything I could want legally, but something felt wrong about the timing. Why the sudden cooperation, Mr. Patterson? There was a pause. There are additional charges being filed today. Charges that could result in significant prison time. Frank is hoping to minimize the damage to his family. What additional charges? Mrs. Williams, I think it would be better if we discuss this in person. Are you available this afternoon? After I hung up, the three of us sat in silence. Finally, Sam spoke. I need to know everything Frank told you, I said to her. Every lie, every promise, every plan. Because if his lawyer is scared, there's something much bigger going on here. And I was starting to suspect I knew exactly what it was. Robert Patterson's office felt like a funeral parlor. Thick carpet, heavy drapes, and an air of barely contained disaster. Frank sat beside his lawyer, looking like a broken man, his expensive suit wrinkled and his confidence completely gone. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Williams, Patterson said. We have a situation. Don't we always? I replied, taking the seat across from them. Patterson slid a folder across his desk. The district attorney has expanded the investigation. They've discovered additional fraudulent activity going back 3 years. 3 years. Frank and I had been having problems for 3 years, and apparently he'd been stealing from me the entire time. How much are we talking about? Including interest and penalties, approximately $200,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. Frank had stolen enough money to buy a house, and I'd never noticed because he'd been careful, strategic, taking just enough to fly under my radar. Frank's been running what amounts to a personal hedge fund, Patterson continued, using stolen money to make investments, keeping the profits, and replacing just enough of the principal to avoid detection. I turned to look at Frank directly for the first time since entering the office. "You've been stealing from me for 3 years." He nodded without meeting my eyes. The affair with Sam, the lies about work meetings, even this office meeting. It's all been about covering up the fact that you're a thief. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," Frank said quietly. "I made some bad investments early on. I was trying to make the money back before you noticed." "But you didn't make it back." "You lost more. The relationship with Sam happened because I was stressed about the money. She was kind to me, understanding. It just developed." "You mean you manipulated a vulnerable young woman into an affair to distract from the fact that you were robbing your wife?" Patterson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Williams, Frank is prepared to make a full confession and cooperate completely with authorities. In exchange, we're hoping you might consider a plea agreement that would keep him out of prison." "Why would I do that?" "Because if this goes to trial, every detail of your private life will become public record. The affair, the financial issues, Mark's involvement, everything. It was a threat wrapped in legal language, but a threat nonetheless. Protect Frank's reputation and privacy, or watch our family's destruction play out in open court." "What does Mark think about this?" "Mark doesn't know about the full extent of the theft yet," Frank said. "I was hoping we could resolve this quietly." That's when I understood. Frank wasn't trying to protect me or our family from embarrassment. He was trying to protect himself from Mark's rage. "You're afraid of your own son." Frank finally looked at me. "Mark trusted me with his financial future. I've been managing his retirement accounts, his investment portfolio, everything. If he finds out what I've really done..." "What have you really done, Frank?" Patterson and Frank exchanged glances. "Perhaps we should call Mark and have him join us," Patterson suggested. "No," I said firmly. "Tell me now." Frank's voice was barely a whisper. "I used Mark's accounts too. His retirement fund, his college savings for the kids he and Sam want to have someday. All of it." The room went silent except for the ticking of Patterson's antique clock. Frank hadn't just stolen from me. He'd stolen his son's entire future. "How much?" "Everything. There's nothing left." I stood up abruptly. "Mr. Patterson, you can tell your client that there will be no plea agreement. Frank can face the consequences of his choices in court, in front of everyone he's betrayed. Mrs. Williams, please reconsider. I'm done considering anything. Frank made his choices. Now he gets to live with them." As I reached the door, Frank called out desperately, "Dot, please, I love you. I've always loved you." I turned back one last time. "Frank, you don't steal from people you love. You steal from people you think are too stupid to notice." The drive home gave me time to think about what I had to do next. Mark deserved to know the truth about his financial situation. Sam deserved to know the full scope of Frank's manipulation. And I deserved to finally stop protecting people who had never protected me. But first, I had a phone call to make. Margaret needed to know that we weren't just dealing with marital infidelity and petty theft anymore. We were dealing with a man who had systematically destroyed 3 lives to fund his fantasies. And it was time he faced the full consequences of that choice. I found Mark and Sam sitting at my kitchen table when I got home, both looking like they'd been crying. The sight of them together, united in their misery, would have been touching if I didn't know what was coming. "How bad is it?" Mark asked. I sat down and opened the folder Patterson had given me. "Your father has stolen approximately $300,000 from our family over the past 3 years." Sam gasped. Mark just stared at me. "That includes everything from your retirement accounts?" "Mark, your college fund, your investment portfolio, even the savings account you thought you were building for a down payment. Everything's gone?" Mark's voice was hollow. "Everything." Sam reached for Mark's hand, but he pulled away. "Don't. Just don't. Mark, I didn't know." "You knew enough," he said coldly. "You knew you were part of whatever scheme he was running." I pulled out another document. "There's more. Sam, Frank showed me some of your text messages, the ones where you two discussed my daily routines, when I'd be out of the house, how to access my computer. He said he needed to check his email," Sam protested weakly. "He was using my computer to access financial accounts. You were helping him spy on me in my own home." The full picture was finally clear. Frank hadn't just been having an affair or making bad financial decisions. He'd recruited Sam as an accomplice, using her access to our family to gather information he needed for his theft. "I want to see the messages," Mark said. I hesitated. "Mark, they're..." Explicit, not just about the money. I want to see them. Against my better judgment, I handed him the printed pages. I watched his face change as he read, saw the exact moment he realized his wife hadn't just betrayed him sexually, but had been actively helping to destroy his financial future. You told him about my promotion bonus, Mark said to Sam. The exact amount, when it would hit my account, everything. He said he was proud of you. He wanted to know so he could plan a celebration. He wanted to know so he could steal it before I noticed. Mark stood up and walked to the window, his back to both of us. I have nothing left. No savings, no retirement, no future, and my wife and father took it all while pretending to love me. Mark, Sam said desperately, we can rebuild. Together. I'll get a second job. We'll live with my parents. Together? Mark turned around, his face transformed by rage. You think we're staying married after this? You said for better or worse. I said that to a woman I thought existed, not to someone who would help my father steal my future and call it love. That's when my phone rang. Margaret's number. Dot, where are you? We have a problem. I'm at home. What's wrong? Frank made bail an hour ago, and according to my contact at the courthouse, he's not alone. Sam's co-workers posted his bond. I looked at Sam, who had gone pale. You called your co-workers? I asked them to help with his bail. He's in jail because of a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Mark exploded. He's in jail because he's a criminal. Margaret's voice continued through the phone. Dot, there's something else. Frank apparently convinced Sam's friends that you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're making false accusations because you can't handle getting older. The manipulation was breathtaking. Even from jail, Frank was orchestrating a campaign to make me look unstable while positioning himself as the victim of a vindictive wife. How many people has he convinced? I asked. Enough. Sam's real estate office is apparently rallying around her, and Frank's old business associates are starting to ask questions about the charges. I hung up and looked at Mark and Sam. Your husband just convinced half the town that I'm having a mental breakdown. That's not what I told them, Sam protested. What exactly did you tell them? That Frank made some mistakes with money, but you were overreacting. That maybe you weren't thinking clearly because of stress. Mark was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Even now, even after everything, you're still protecting him. I was trying to protect all of us, Sam said desperately. No, I said quietly. You were protecting yourself. And Frank. Always Frank. That's when we heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I could see Frank getting out of a taxi, looking confident for the first time in days. He was coming home, probably expecting to find his confused, breakdown-prone wife ready to forgive and forget. Instead, he was about to face the consequences of underestimating me one final time. Frank walked through my front door like he owned the place, carrying flowers and wearing that charming smile that had fooled me for 42 years. Dot, sweetheart, we need to talk. I know you're confused, but I can explain everything. Behind him stood 3 people I recognized from Sam's real estate office, including her boss, Patricia Walsh. They'd come as witnesses, clearly expecting to find me in some kind of emotional crisis. Hello, Frank. Patricia. I stayed seated at my kitchen table, surrounded by evidence of his crimes. How nice of you all to drop by. Mrs. Williams, Patricia said gently, we're concerned about you. Sam told us you've been under a lot of stress lately, and we think there might be some misunderstandings about Frank's business dealings. Misunderstandings? I gestured to the documents spread across my table. You mean like how I misunderstood that my husband stole $300,000 from our family? Now, Dot, Frank said in that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. Let's not exaggerate. I made some investments that didn't work out. That's not stealing. Investments with money you took from accounts that weren't yours? Our accounts, sweetheart. We're married. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. I looked at Mark, who was standing in the corner watching this performance with disgust. Mark, would you please read from page 12 of Frank's confession? Mark picked up the document and began reading in a clear, cold voice. I accessed my son's retirement accounts without his knowledge or permission and used the funds for personal investments. I opened credit cards in my wife's name without her consent. I forged her signature on multiple financial documents. The real estate agents shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the confused, vindictive wife they'd been told about. Frank also confessed to using Sam as an accomplice, I continued. She provided him with information about our family's daily routines, financial discussions, and personal business that he used to facilitate the theft. That's not true, Sam said quickly. I never meant to help him steal anything. But you did help him, Mark said quietly, whether you meant to or not. Frank was starting to look desperate. Dot, you're taking everything out of context. Yes, I made mistakes, but we can work through this as a family. We're not a family anymore, Frank. Families don't steal from each other. That's when Patricia spoke up. Mrs. Williams, with all due respect, marriage involves forgiveness. Frank made some poor financial decisions, but that doesn't mean— Ma'am, I interrupted. With all due respect, you don't know what you're talking about. Frank didn't make poor decisions. He systematically stole from his wife and son for 3 years while having an affair with his daughter-in-law. That's not a mistake. That's a criminal enterprise. I stood up and walked to my wall safe, which I'd had installed the previous week. Inside was something I'd been saving for exactly this moment. Frank, do you remember our 25th wedding anniversary? You gave me this beautiful necklace and told me it was my inheritance from your grandmother. I held up an elegant pearl necklace that I'd treasured for 17 years. Turns out it's fake. Costume jewelry worth maybe $50. But the real necklace, the one that actually belonged to your grandmother, you sold it 3 years ago to cover your gambling debts. The receipt is in your personal effects from the arrest. Frank's face went white. The room was completely silent. You see, Patricia, this isn't about money or poor decisions or marriage problems. This is about a man who has been living a lie for years, stealing from everyone who trusted him, and convincing people like you that I'm the problem. I turned to Frank one final time. You gave me costume jewelry for our anniversary and told me it was a family heirloom. You stole our son's future and called it love. You manipulated a young woman into betraying her marriage and convinced her it was romance. Dot, please, I'm not finished. You've spent our entire marriage making me feel like I wasn't smart enough, successful enough, interesting enough to deserve honesty. But the truth is, you're just a common thief who got comfortable stealing from people who loved you. Frank started to cry then, real tears of defeat. What do you want me to do? I want you to face the consequences of your choices like an adult. I want you to stop lying, stop manipulating, and stop trying to make everyone else responsible for the mess you created. The real estate agents left quickly after that, suddenly understanding they'd been used as props in Frank's latest manipulation. Sam followed them, finally accepting that her marriage to Mark was over and her future with Frank had been built on lies. Mark and I stood alone in my kitchen, looking at the wreckage of our family. What happens now? Mom? Now we rebuild. You're 28 years old with a good job and your whole life ahead of you. I'm 64 years old with my freedom finally back. We're going to be just fine. How can you be sure? I smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in years. Because we're finally free to find out who we really are when we're not being lied to every day. 6 months later, I was sitting on the deck of my new apartment, overlooking the lake, reading a letter from Mark. He'd taken a job in Seattle, started dating again, and was building a life based on honesty instead of manipulation. Frank was serving 2 years in minimum security prison. Sam had moved back to Michigan and was working to rebuild her relationship with her parents. And me? I was learning to live without constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next lie or betrayal. It turned out freedom was something you had to fight for, but once you had it, it was worth everything you'd lost along the way. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you really is the best thing that could have happened. You just have to be brave enough to walk through the fire to find out what's waiting on the other side. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.